On this episode of the show, I have with me Wyatt Smith. He is founder and CEO at UpSmith. We're going to be talking about Agentic AI and what that means within his domain. We're going to talk about understanding and listening to customer problems, really trying to solve some of those productivity limitations. We're going to talk about what does Agentic AI mean, some of the impact that he is seeing at UpSmith. We're going to also talk about what productivity and human in the loop mean. I think a lot of stuff we're trying to cover with you, Wyatt. I appreciate your time.
I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for the chance to join the podcast. Excited to share.
Absolutely. Before we dive in, why don't you tell everyone what UpSmith does?
Well, UpSmith's very focused on helping skilled trades businesses across the United States win. And we're very focused on deploying technology that helps them become data companies, helps them to really drive better personalization for their end customers, homeowners all across the country for the home services market. And in the process, we help skilled trades people, the folks that do really essential services across the country in plumbing, electrical, HVAC businesses thrive and live very flourishing careers.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting. I have noticed a trend in some recent guests that I've had on of people picking and focusing on industries that typically otherwise would not get a lot of attention. And you mentioned, particular areas of, skilled trade. It's not something where we typically think about applying AI or a similar technology to. I guess before we start, tell us a little bit about that. I guess I just want to understand when we're talking about your solution and we're talking about tradespeople, where does it fit in?
Yeah. Well, the trades businesses that we're serving are phenomenal, essential businesses for our country, and they're comprised of people that are super hardworking, that have very purposeful jobs as builders, that solve problems for people every day, and do it in a way that's tireless. And I think in many ways, unsung heroes in society. They also have really complex businesses. They are getting tens of thousands of phone calls, messages, email input for people that are wanting their services. And then they're dispatching hundreds of technicians in many cases in trucks to go and serve people, doing so in a way that often is decentralized and doesn't allow for a lot of really close coaching for people to be side by side with their manager. And so there's lots of challenges for how you deliver that service really well. And if you do it really well, the payoff is immense. The US market is in excess of $500 billion of spend every year just in the US. And so we see a big opportunity to help what is a really fragmented landscape of contractors build businesses that can really flourish in that environment.
I love that. I guess when you're talking about tradespeople, they are absolutely essential. They have capacity constraints. Obviously, they can only do so much work. When we're talking about productivity improvements, just again, I love to understand when we're talking about having them become more productive, what are they working on that makes them unproductive to start with?
Well, they themselves, the work they're doing on a unit basis is often very productive. The thing that ultimately is the drain on productivity is having the wrong person dispatched to the wrong job at the wrong time. And that's a coordination problem that large language models and agentic AI can really help solve. And so what we're wanting to do is to untap the potential of these companies to focus their people, which is their most important resource, against the highest and best use of their time. And that's something that technology provides a really powerful role in doing.
What does that universe look like now? I guess if I don't know much about the trades industry, and I guess if I'm a listener and I'm listening, I'm wondering, what does that world look like now? What are some of the problems that might be present in areas that are maybe lacking some of the more advanced tech we see in other industries?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a very much day in the life. There's a customer that we serve in Arizona, and there's a great leader named Allie who leads their call center. And the call center is really the heartbeat of the business, because as people are having problems, their air conditioning goes out in the middle of the summer in Arizona, that's a problem. They're calling in for help. And so that call is being triaged by Allie's team, and they're deciding, okay, well, what capacity do we have on our board today? Who are the professionals that we could dispatch to solve this person's problem? how do we match them up against where the opportunities are? And then when that person dispatches, they're in a truck, they go out to the person's home, they introduce themselves, they do a bit of an inspection to diagnose what could be going on, and they come back with some recommended courses of action that would fix the problem. And it's only at that point that an end consumer, a homeowner like you or I, decides what to do, decides how to finance it, decides, ultimately how to resolve that problem. And then that company goes to work. They will dispatch an installation team, or in some cases have that service technician perform the work there on site in the moment. Well, until that happens, no value has been captured. Lots of value has been generated, but no revenue has been booked. And so it's really important to think about what are the jobs and where do you send the people and how do you make sure it's the right person with the right skills to be able to resolve that problem. And that's a really big challenge for people like Callie. Even more so if she knows that their business is really hinging on these demand calls that are tied to the system not functioning properly and then ultimately needing to be replaced, which is honestly the biggest driver of revenue. Often in excess of 60% of the revenue in these businesses comes from those types of activities. And so it's really stressful if you know how many of those activities you need to have every day in order to be able to hit your budget, but you're at the mercy of waiting for the phone to ring to determine if that's going to happen or not. And so what we've learned is these companies have extraordinary amounts of data inside them, but it goes untapped. And there's an opportunity to build software that can help people tap into that data, which is honestly one of the most valuable assets at their disposal, and then go on offense. Reach out to people and say, we've served you in the past. We love the opportunity we had to do it. We'd love to serve you again. Our records indicate that your system is probably coming up near the end of its life, and before the summer hits, we'd love to have somebody come check in on it, make sure things are going okay. That's a really high quality service experience that delivers lots of trust, lots of credibility, and with a brand that you've had some experience with in the past in a positive way. Well, now all of a sudden, Allie's going on offense. She can say, I get to set the board. I can make sure that I'm going to have enough work for my team. I can ensure that people that are operating in a commission-driven environment are going to be able to have a great outcome for themselves and for their families and to grow as professionals themselves. And that's a really cool thing. And it's a very much human-centric productivity problem to solve, which our team is really fired up to have a chance to do.
I guess when you're looking at selling this type solution, audience might or might not have a lot of experience with technology, right? Your customers, they might either be progressive, they might not be. When you go into these businesses and you're talking to maybe their owner operators, smaller businesses, but obviously in the trades business, a lot of logistics, as you just mentioned, goes into it. What does that sales process look like? And I guess I'm asking because maybe some of the audience has not really sold into those areas, and I think it'd be interesting to hear the differences of what you have to go through.
Yeah. Well, it might surprise some to learn that a lot of these owner operators are pretty sophisticated insofar as they're experimenting with lots of different types of technology all the time. Almost everyone that we're serving has adopted some type of system of record for enterprise resource planning or for field service management. And so there already is this repository of data that exists around who called, who the person was, what they asked for, who got dispatched, what inspection was conducted, what the notes were of that inspection, did they get invoiced? Now, there's often a bunch of operational debt. So like things that are not happening nearly as much as well as they want them to because they don't have enough people to go and solve all those problems. But they've experimented with ways to try to help resolve some of the pain points there with different types of technology. They're very cost conscious. It matters to their P&L. It shows up in the money that they can take home as the owner of that business, what they spend on software and what drives their overheads. So like having a really clear understanding of the business case is important. And then a lot of times these customers are very moved by example use cases where other contractors who look like them have had success on the product. And so a lot of our success in getting a chance to serve someone who's a new customer comes from having some proof points to point to for people that look like them.
I like that. And it's interesting because you mentioned the data is there and they don't necessarily, in the analogy, I guess I speak to I've spoken to a fair number of health or insure tech startups, it sounds like the same problem, which is kind of interesting. The more we talk, it's like, well, these are similar problems across different industries is getting to that data. When you're kind of in, providing that art of the possible conversation, and you're like, well, this is what we're going to be able to do. We're going to take your data and we're going to magically do all this stuff for you, and it's stuff that you don't have to worry about. I guess what is your customer's view of the AI or the system being proactive on their behalf? What are their feelings?
It's a great question. My experience has been that people are really excited about the possibility that AI can unlock for their business, but they're circumspect. Like they want to see it before they really go all in. They want to do right by their customers, and they don't want their customers to have a bad experience. They're a little bit uncertain about, am I going to lose the humanness of my company if I rely on AI to be able to interact with my end customer? I want to protect that pretty fiercely. I had a contractor last week in Jackson, Mississippi, who told me I experimented with an AI answering service that would help to replicate what AI in a call center could look like. And one of my customers who I've known for a very long time, who we've served for over 8 years, called me on my personal cell phone and said, "Hey, Josh, I don't want to talk to a robot." And when there's an 8-second delay after I ask a question, I know that that's a robot. And so my point of view on that is that, sure, latency is a thing that exists in applications of voice AI products today, but that's going to get better. The models will keep improving. The technology will become more and more lifelike. We will cross the uncanny valley. But for contractors who are making real investments in technology today, there's some level of uncertainty until we've proven that as technologists who are serving them. And so I think the burden of proof is for definitely with us to show that we can deliver a real magical experience. And when you're in my seat and you have a real strong optimism around where we're going with what's possible, and you want to bet on the future that could be 6 weeks from now or 6 months from now, but it sure is likely closer than 6 years from now. It's a thing that is a conversation. And we think about it sequencing in a sequencing way with our customer to say, like, hey, we're going to start with this application that's going to be really lifelike. And then we're going to, over time, continue progressing towards one that's going to be even more and more robust across other modalities too, like voice. And I think that's worked for contractors who maybe have some inherent skepticism about how this will work because they want to win. And they do see the future being one that fully embraces innovations like this.
I guess when you look at, and in this case, it sounds like the AI will actually potentially generate more work for them, more proactive
Correct.
work for them, right? So I guess we have been hearing the last 18 months of all the job loss that will happen. I guess maybe talk to us a little bit about. I mean, we hear about it. That's
Sure.
the big story of all this job loss that we are going to experience. You're telling us that you have an AI solution that potentially might create more work, might actually have a need for them to not hire in certain areas, but in certain other areas, or maybe you could explain to us how your solution impacts the actual labor headcount.
Yeah. Well, look, our insight is not a novel one. It's the belief that advances in technology automate tasks, not people. And so a person's job changes because the tasks that they take on as activities in their job change. And it frees them up to do more productive work, things that humans are better centered to do. And it allows the machines to do the work that machines are better centered to do around taking large amounts of unstructured data, putting structure around it, putting a workflow against that, and then acting on the workflow. I'll give you a very simple example. Many companies in the home services sector are very invested in building relationships with their customers and then reaching out to them on some regular basis to offer them maintenance visits, checkups, things like that. Today, that is a human-driven exercise. It is a person on a phone calling people and finding a time that works for them to dispatch a technician to perform that checkup. That is a role that a machine is very, very well dialed to do. And when you think about the challenge of cold calling, it can be kind of brutal. You're getting someone, maybe it's not a convenient time of day, maybe they're busy with other things. Like your hit rate could be 5 and 200 calls over the course of a day, which is a pretty tough mental and emotional experience for someone. On the 200th call, the AI agent is every bit as cheerful as the first one, in empowering the human being to focus his or her energy on resolving complex problems, talking to someone who's had a bad customer experience, giving someone really good news that the quote's going to be actually like way lower than they anticipated it was going to have to be, and they're going to fix the problem for a much better price. That's a thing that a human in the loop delivering a service experience does better. And I think that's what's really cool about the future of AI-enabled service businesses. Machines do the things that they're best designed to do, freeing up humans to do the things that they're best designed to do, and then more productivity being generated in the process. It's a really fun thing to be able to build.
Interesting. I love that view. I guess as you're kind of talking about, we're talking about the agentic AI, and we have all this data, some level of technical sophistication depending on where they are in that maturity. This data that's residing there and the agentic component of it, I guess maybe talk to us a little bit about how the agentic component fits with the team that actually is using it. And the reason I'm asking is we talk a lot about human in the loop. I mean, even as technology professionals, I don't know if we've all really had agentic AI doing things for us on our work. I know in our personal lives we have it set up. You know, we all have Alexas to turn lights on and off, and those are all some level of task. But when we're talking about an agent interacting with the human, talk about that handoff. That I guess maybe some nuances there.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think a lot of us are learning about this because of how new the applications are. I mean, it's really been in the last 9 to 10 months that the underlying compute power reached a point where it was performing in many ways on massive multitask understanding models better than a human expert could do. And so that just unlocks so much potential where you're not dealing with a chatbot anymore, but you're dealing with a worker, a digital worker who can act on your behalf. So the key of the interface today for us is in the prompting. It's in giving really clear direction for the boundary conditions that you want the agent to observe as it carries out its task. And there's a little bit of a white glove dynamic to this where we've seen enough examples of that task being carried out that we can propose presets on those boundary conditions. And then the person's confirming the presets and saying, yep, like these are the parameters that would make sense to carry out this job if I was coaching a new hire on how to do it. The other thing that's pretty interesting is that you can teach the model, right? So you can upload documentation that you would typically have given to a new hire as a way of training that person on the workflow and the things you want them to participate in. And then the agent has some level of contextual understanding of that training document relative to all the other data points. And in this relational model, they then can act on that. I'm using personified pronouns to speak about it because it's just easier to wrap our arms around. But what's really interesting to contemplate is that as agents begin talking to other agents, they can communicate in a way that's much more efficient than humans do through human language. And that's going to unlock a whole nother level of opportunity that we haven't begun to scratch the surface of, where you can give prompting to one agent and have it interact with another in a way that gets to an even more efficient outcome.
I love that. And the reason I say that is your description was, you know, as we're talking about human in the loop and where those agents start and stop, I think that really gives us a good understanding of where we're going to gain. Because I think a lot of times what you mentioned, this repository of data that sits there that goes untapped, and but also it's underserving the customer within healthcare. It's a missed appointment. No one's going to surface that. It's just going to go missed. Yep. There's no proactive. In the case of your service vendors, I actually, as a homeowner, might really like it if somebody who serviced our hot water heater 5 years ago that did the install be like, listen, end of life is 7 years. Instead of having another leak through your through your first floor, do you want us to come take a look at it? That would certainly have me stop and get my attention, because I'd be like, yeah, I don't want a leak because the hot water heater goes bad. And I think these are things that all of us probably take for granted, and we're all reactionary. And I think you're telling me that all these things can be proactive, and they're going to be things I'm going to pay for anyways. It might be cheaper if they're proactive.
Yeah. And the other really important thing about the example you just gave is that everyone's experience is better off because of the introduction of the technology.
Yep.
So the service provider using our tool can say, hey, Amir, I, I recall 5 years ago you had this issue, and it seems based on our records that you were concerned about financing at the time. And so we can talk about some financing options that we've been able to unlock for people like you to be able to make this even easier for this time. Or last time we came, there was an issue on the cooling unit by your upstairs playroom that we talked about, but you decided it wasn't quite the right time to be able to act on. We can send out the right person to check on that again, given that it's been 5 years and the system's only gotten a little bit more deteriorated since then. In a sea of over 500,000 service providers across the United States, that it's like so fragmented, that is hugely differentiated. If you in the moment can be able to speak with precision about nuances from your home service visit 5 years ago. And that's the thing that a human being on the phone with you when you're calling and talking about something like can't easily go pull. But the agent having context in all of the data and knowing what types of things would be most important to be able to reference to build some amount of credibility and trust with you that they're going to do a good job if you rely on this company to send another person out this time, that's huge. And it drives like a 6x improvement in conversion relative to traditional methods based on the data we're seeing so far, which is a game changer for a family-owned business.
I love the use cases. I think it's fascinating because as you're speaking, I'm like, wow, there's so many little things that probably exist. And I think what's interesting with this is that these are, and I guess maybe aside is I think everyone's always worried about their privacy and people learning more. I'm actually realizing if you start viewing these agents as not privacy intrusion, but people, if we're going to label them people, agents that are actually there to help you, learn from you, to actually understand what you need. And I always joke, I go, I love it if Meta's listening to me and they just show up with a pizza at 7 p.m. when it knows that I haven't, we haven't planned for cooking. That'd be great. That'd be the best outcome. And I guess that's maybe where we're talking about a lot of this stuff going is you're mentioning agents talking to agents. The more we're understanding the customer, the more we're able to be proactive in our understanding. I guess with your solution, if you were to put your spidey senses on and look out in the future, like how much automation can go through these service providers, like in terms of what you're seeing capabilities now, and then as you mentioned, agents talking to other agents?
Yeah. Well, I think the contact center of the future looks very different than the call center of today. I'm sitting in a large call center right now in Florida, and there's just like rows and rows and rows of chairs. But you don't need to fill all those chairs with human beings doing the same thing that you would have had to do 5 years ago to create a similar outcome, which means like you can use this space differently, right? Like, and it's not a case of like laying people off. It's like growing the business with operational leverage because you don't need as many people to generate the next dollar of revenue because you're able to outbound through these agentic purposes. And like, that's really, really cool. And it means that more value flows to the business. And again, these are all commission-driven businesses. So when the person ultimately at the end of the value chain elects to purchase something, and that number goes up relative to last year, everybody takes home more money. And so it's very much like a meritocratic system, which in many cases is like the most basic building block of how we think about capitalism. But it's in a way that I think is really, really cool as it relates to how leverage through technology can create better outcomes for human beings. And so to your question specifically, automation, where does it end? I think there's always a role for human beings to deliver services because it is a real human experience to trust someone to come into your home, which is in many cases the most valuable asset you own. It's where your most intimate experiences with your family happen. It's the place that you're like really guarded about. And we have a person that can like take that responsibility and the sacredness of it very seriously and say, if this was my mom, or if this was my aunt, or if this was my brother, like here's what I would tell them. That matters. And I don't see that going away in the very near future, even if you can create robotic assistants that are helping, the installation and service of some of these assets. That's a real human to human experience. It's not dissimilar from healthcare. You talked about healthcare a bit earlier. A patient-centered experience is still a human-delivered one. And so I think the advent of increasing forms of automation is just meant to make that experience more rich.
I love it. I think Very insightful to understand where this agentic AI is being used within an industry that maybe others have not really envisioned that use case. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. If somebody does want to just follow up with you, something that you mentioned, they want to ask a follow-up question, what is a good way of connecting with you?
My email is Wyatt at upsmith.com, UPSMITH.com. Follow me on social media. I'm Wyatt_H_Smith on X. I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. I just would love hearing from people that are working on similar problems or who are builders who are really excited about an application of artificial intelligence against a giant industry that has a huge impact on people at really the backbone of our country. And we're always looking to grow the team and bring more people on. It'd be really fun to connect with people that are fired up about that mission.
Awesome, man. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing.
I'm very grateful for the invitation. You got a really cool thing going here, Amir. It's fun to be a part of it.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. That's it for this show. We'll come back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I really like this episode because I think we walk through where Agentic AI will step in an industry that maybe a lot of people have not really thought about it impacting. I think Wyatt did a great job of walking us through understanding that relationship, the problem, his sales challenges and how he has to approach those, and also where the productivity enhancements come from. I think this was a really good tactical understanding of how the agent is actually working. And if you have a question, please follow up with Wyatt. I think he'd be happy to give you further details on something he mentioned on the show. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.